Hello, class. My name is Professor Sharon Chanley, and I received my bachelor's degree from Boston University in psychology and women's studies, and my PhD in experimental psychopathology from Tufts University. And we are here today to talk about the brain, and specifically the lobes of the brain, because if you didn't know it, your brain has 4 distinct lobes. So the learning objectives for this lesson are to first locate the lobes of the brain, be able to identify one function of each, and to understand one result of brain injury or illness in depth. And believe it or not, we're going to do this all in 5 minutes. So we're going to start at the back of the brain. At the back of the brain are the occipital lobes involved in vision. And this might seem kind of startling because your eyes are here and information about vision has to travel all the way to the back of the brain. But that's how it happens. And so in this part of the brain is your primary visual cortex, responsible for most of the conscious aspects of sight. And if you damage this region of the brain through injury, you will be functionally blind, even if your eyes are working perfectly fine and doing everything they should be doing. If this part of the brain is damaged, you won't be able to consciously see. But one interesting phenomenon that's an exception to this is called blind sight. There are other regions of the brain in other lobes that are responsible for other aspects of vision, such as motion and direction. And so you may have seen clips in movies or on YouTube where people who are functionally blind because of damage to the occipital lobes can still catch a ball, for instance. They have no conscious perception of seeing a ball, but they can catch it. Remarkable. So that's the occipital lobe. Coming down underneath the brain are the temporal lobes. We have one on each side. A lot of auditory information is processed in the temporal lobes, which kind of makes sense because it's near the ear. There are also many regions here involving understanding and producing spoken language and some emotional and motivational behaviors. One interesting structure within the temporal lobes is called the fusiform gyrus, and you can see it depicted here in blue. The fusiform gyrus is a temporal lobe structure involved in facial recognition, being able to tell you're my sister, you're my teacher, and you're my friend, just by looking at someone's face. In fact, if you damage this region of the brain, if you damage the fusiform gyrus, you might experience something called prosopagnosia, which is a disability where you can no longer recognize people's faces. You can often figure out who they are by context clues. If the person's standing in the front of the class with a chalkboard eraser, they're probably your teacher, for instance, but you have difficulty actually distinguishing people using the face alone. And I didn't know this until recently, but apparently Brad Pitt has prosopagnosia. Above the temporal lobes, but behind the front, we have the parietal lobes. And these are regions involved in attention and spatial location. So figuring out where things are in space and directing your attention to them. An interesting phenomenon that can happen if you have damage to the parietal lobes is something called spatial neglect, where if you have damage, especially to the right parietal lobe, often through stroke, you stop attending to the left side of space. It's not that you can't see the left side of space. If I direct your attention there, if you move your head, you can consciously see the material, but you neglect it, you ignore it, you don't pay attention. And so folks with spatial neglect, for instance, if you give them the models here on the left, the clock, the house, and the flower, and ask them to copy those drawings, they'll draw something like what's on the right. They will neglect the left side of those images. And then finally, the frontal lobes are involved in motor control, especially fine motor control, so voluntarily moving your body, and what we call executive functions. And executive functions are all those kinds of intellectual planning, delay of gratification functions that we think separate us from a lot of the rest of the animal kingdom. So things like planning and selection, persisting and ignoring distractions, memory for what you have already done, and responding to context. There's a terrible form of dementia called frontotemporal dementia, or FTP, that attacks the frontal lobes, and there's a deterioration of them. People with this disease rapidly lose a lot of cognitive functions, and their personalities are forever changed. So there we have it: frontal, parietal, temporal, occipital. Hopefully you learned a little bit about the function of the lobes of the brain and one form of illness or injury in depth. Thank you.